By the way, one way to solve that, which I've occasionally suggested, is that on this, as on other issues, there should be a punishment for frivolously making a claim that is untrue. So if, for instance, you frivolously claim that the people who disagree with you are all racists, you should suffer some form of societal shame and consequence equivalent to that which you are trying to hand out. Otherwise, there's just no reason not to keep doing it. I mean, I've said this to Sam before. We discussed this on your podcast when I suggested that when people erroneously make various claims against Sam, he should just say, well, it's just a shame you're such a paedophile. And they go, what? And, you know, and if they say, I beg your pardon, you go, it's not my fault you keep on shagging kids. And they go, what do you, you know? And they're like, we're all quite annoyed about it, but, you know, it's and just keep, just keep going on.
Just don't say that to Majid, because he'll get $3.4 million out of it.
But, you know, you should say, look, you've made an insincere claim.
You know what Douglas said there was so absolutely classic. That's exactly the way you do, folks. You fight fire with fire. That's exactly what you do. So I've always said this myself, that when someone's projecting onto you and says that you're a racist, you immediately step back and you say, excuse me, but you know what? You're the racist. For bringing that up, you're the racist. You called me a bigot? No, 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 no. You brought that up. You're the bigot because of the racist statement that you just made. And you get them on the defensive immediately. Because what people do is as soon as they hear that racist word, as soon as they hear that bigot word, most people just back away. You know, they don't want to get involved. They think, uh-oh, everyone's going to think that it's true because they go, no, no, no. You just forcefully, calmly, right back at them. And as Douglas basically said there, if you want to add your own thing to it, you know, oh, another one could be is, you know what? I heard also that, you know, you're a wife beater or you beat your girlfriend. I heard that. You know, what do you think of that? Right? Oh, what do you mean? You know, what do you mean you're not? Well, can you prove it? How do you know? We heard about it. It was tweeted about. It was in the papers. I think somebody said it someplace. I heard it. That's basically what you're basically doing. You want to solidify the ground that you stand on. You want to defend your turf. But if somebody launches an offensive volley at you, instead of playing defense, you go right back on offense and go from there. Anyways, folks, there's so much more with all these guys here on this debate stage. We're going to get back to it in the next few seconds. But before we do, you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, where I give you my political prescription from my political perspective of what happens when Douglas Murray, Majid Nawaz, the Weinsteins, Sam Harris, all of them get together and they start talking about things, social media, government, politics, policy, immigration, everything just collides. Let's get back to more of the debate right now.
Electing for so long in Western debates about immigration, and that culture is a thing, and it's really important. And it's important because what it means, what do we mean when we say culture, is all of the values that bind us together, and it's our social contract. And if the social contract is being attacked, we don't know how to live together anymore. Yeah. And so one thing that Goodhart is very good at in the UK is an author, David Goodhart. And we have been pretending for so long, especially through the 90s, with this word multiculturalism, that one culture is not in any way better than another. And so I think it was you and Sam, actually, both of you have been asked this question and posed this question before. And there is only one unequivocal answer to this question. Is what we enjoy here in Australia and the culture that we enjoy, however you want to define it, better than the culture that the Taliban want to create in Afghanistan? And there is only one unequivocal answer to that, and is yes, obviously. And you're being, again, people are gaslighting you if they equivocate in the answer to that question.
Yeah, I do think that that's unnecessary. I agree with that statement. So it's better here than the Taliban. Let's be clear.
I'll give away this second.
The flat whites are much better here than they are in Kabul.
All I'm going to say is that so we've got to at least recognize that culture is as important to this debate as how fast or slow the immigration rate it should be, because it becomes a political problem.
Here's why I rarely recommend so-called prostate solutions, like drinking less fluids, saw palmetto, or TRT to my patients. And
the point is, you don't. That's overkill. Like what you said is true, but there's some people who can't make any value judgments because that would be cruel. Right?
Yeah.
All right, it's not about that.
Yeah.
You guys drive on a side of the road that I don't recognize as being the correct side of the road to an American. All right, is it better to drive on the left side or the right side? No, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that everybody drives on a common side, that you don't have things that are incompatible, right, running into each other. And so if you have some state that says church and state have to be separate, and you have another place that says church and state are the same thing, I don't need to get into a discussion about better or worse or values, because that's unnecessarily value-laden. I know that you don't want those two things. Are the Crips better than the Bloods as a gang? I don't know. I just don't want to house them in the same cell block of the prison, right? So there are certain aspects of this that are simply about compatibility that can evade the value judgment so that we don't have to get into that thorny territory. Now, there is I think way too much of this ends up for an American taste because we don't have the same issues with Islam yet in our immigration situation that Europe has. So in the US situation, what I would say is you have never, ever, ever heard an honest immigration conversation. The people who sound compassionate are not compassionate. You have a class of people I call immigrant-entrepreneurs who are making money based on immigration, like immigration lawyers or people who run pension plans, who are trying to figure these things out from a financial perspective. And what happens is that you have domestic groups transferring money amongst themselves. Like, let me steal some money from over here and give it to some people over here in the same country. The owners of capital say, hey, I see that labor is getting a certain share. If I can use immigration, I can beat down wages by pushing out the supply curve. And then fundamentally, I can capture a giant prize called the Borjas rectangle, just living inside a tiny efficiency gain in economics called the Harburger triangle. So you talk about the Harburger triangle as this little efficiency gain, but the real thing that you're salivating over is if I can just get labor to hate themselves for worrying about immigration, by worrying that there's somehow xenophobic, then fundamentally I can push down wages and make it impossible for people to agitate for more money, better conditions, et cetera, which is why it's so bizarre that the left has been fooled. I mean, it's just amazing. And I was told this by people in Washington. Somebody said to me, you don't understand how brilliant our immigration policy is. If you object to any part of it, you're a xenophobe. So we have a way of getting American labor to give up on itself because we will make them self-hating. Right? This is a conscious part of the conversation. And when I discovered in the 90s that in 1986, the American National Science Foundation had done a study of how to keep American scientists from making more money by using visas to make Americans mitigate their wage demands, I thought, this is completely bananas. We're supposed to be drawing our own people into our own fields, and we're secretly plotting against them using economic theory. And what are we doing? We're using immigrants as an invidious tool to transfer money between groups. And then what we do is we say, oh, you wouldn't hurt an immigrant, would you? Well, no, I'm not angry at immigrants at all. I'm angry at domestic rent seekers who have figured out how to manipulate the situation. It doesn't require culture. It doesn't require any discussion of Islam. The key point here is that you have never been allowed to have or hear a conversation about immigration in adult terms where compassion, where self-interest, I guarantee you that there's nobody on this panel who is for open borders, and there is nobody on this panel who is for closed borders. Right?
Just in the European context, though, I think the cultural conversation around Islam is particularly difficult to avoid because you've got citizens of Europe born and raised.
I'm not saying that there is no cultural issue. We have cultural issues in the US as well. And I do think, to be honest, that we benefit from a certain amount of foreign culture to give us hybrid vigor, right? So it's not that I'm trying to keep American culture pristine and we have to only integrate. I don't want to only integrate. I'm pretty excited about immigrants, and I want to make sure that we have a sustainable stream for generations to come by not binging and purging and doing some sort of violent process that is based upon allowing people to manipulate our heartstrings against our better interests.
Douglas, and then
there's a set of
Eric Weinstein basically talking about the immigration problem and the cultural or lack of a cultural situation in the United States of America as compared to what's happening in Western Europe. And he was basically talking about it from a means of an economic standpoint, that how the political parties and those people in power are utilizing or using the fear of immigration, the fear of immigrants, the fear of change in order to manipulate it in a way that they can basically line their pockets and bring about policies that are going to be able to better, suit the power establishments or suit these entities or companies that think that they can utilize, immigrant wages. Because the thing is that, yes, the more you have of something, guess what? You're going to lower the quality. The more you have, for example, if you import more workers into an already situation in which workers are not needed, but you bring more of them into the situation, you're going to depress wages. It's the same thing. If you want to make something not available to people, tax the hell out of it. If you put a huge amount of taxes on something, you'll stop selling it, you'll stop making it, and you'll stop buying it. Reduce the taxes on something, it'll increase the amount of sales, increase the productivity of that item, as long as it's something that people want, obviously. But this whole idea of having the immigrants in the middle of this tug of war between business interests and money from Washington and policies and politics and whatever, unfortunately is going to continue on. But what Eric was saying is that as far as the cultural aspect, we're not nowhere even close to what's happening in Europe. And the main reason is because we are separated by waters. We're separated by boundaries. Now, what's happening on the southern border from the Hispanic and Latino and the people of Latin America and Hispanic people coming through, well, that's of its own demographic, that's changing things and bringing a different type of culture, different type of, set of values, into the United States of America from those people that are just either coming here legally and, of course, illegally. So that's a whole different topic, in terms of that. But for right now, as Eric pointed out, there really isn't that big of a deal yet of the type of thing that's happening in Europe, where they're saying the Islamization of Europe is occurring, especially in those areas where the immigrants tend to populate in those, ghetto areas, basically, and just collectively colonize, for lack of a better word, that the population in those cities like Leeds, Birmingham, even in London right now, is like 50, 60, 70%, immigrants and like first wave immigrants. So that's what's happening. But here in America, because the landmass is so diverse, you don't have that other than basically Dearborn, Michigan, which is about 25,000 American Arab population, of which probably, a majority are Muslim, but there are Christian Arabs that live there too as well. So that's probably the largest block that of like a community that's living together. Otherwise, everyone's pretty much, spread out, so to speak. Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host. My name is Dr. Nasir, and if you haven't done so already and you like our content, we'd love for you to go ahead and smash that button to sign up, to hit that subscription button, sign up, subscribe to the channel. Put your comments down below. We'd love to know what you think, what you thought about this, our dialogue here with the video. I'll leave with my final thought, which is, when you're right, you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.